The Bluebell Railway is home to many locomotives, from small Victorian Edwardian tank engines to their new build Atlantic beachy head. The railway is home to the second largest collection of steam locomotives in Britain. But did you know about the engines formerly based on the Bluebell? If not, then you've come to the right place. These are the former Bluebell engines. Built in 1880 by Fletcher Jennings to the unusual gauge of 3 foot 2 1/4 inch gauge, Townsend Hook spent its working life with the Dorking Greystone Limeco Limited, alongside its twin, William Finlay, and their big brother, Captain Baxter. Apart from a boiler change in 1897 and getting bodied by some trucks in 1937, it had a fairly uneventful career until 1952, when it was withdrawn due to a broken axle bearing and was put into storage. It was preserved by the Narrow Gauge Railway Society and arrived at Sheffield Park on the 10th of April 1960, a few months before Stepney's arrival. It doesn't seem to have done much, if anything, while it was there. It left in early 1962 after the NGRS opened a museum in Brockham, Surrey, a few miles from Betchworth where it used to work. In 1982, the museum closed, and it, along with the rest of the collection, was moved to the Amberley Museum, where it's resided ever since. The last thing of significance it did was attend the Fletcher Jennings reunion at the Tully-Flynn Railway, where it met Captain Baxter and William Finlay. It is unlikely that it will run again due to the fact that its boiler and water tanks, among other parts, will need to be replaced, and its unusual track gauge hindering its usefulness. Built in 1896 by Neilson & Co., it was made to work at Beckton Works in East London. The retort towers had low headroom, so number 25 was built to fit through them, as evident by its unusually small stature. The withdrawal date is unknown, but it was preserved by the Industrial Locomotive Society and arrived on the 25th of October 1961. Realised to be a locomotive rather outside the overall scope of the collection, it left on the 2nd of August 1967 and is currently based at Bressingham Steam Museum in Norfolk. Built in 1927 by Avonside of Bristol, Stamford spent its working life around the Ironside quarries in Rutland until the 4th of June 1969, when it hauled the last ironstone train out of the quarry. It was purchased by a group of locomotive department members based at the Bluebell Railway and later arrived there on the 24th of October 1969. But it was never used as it was in worse condition than previously thought, and with more engines coming to the railway in the coming years, it was made surplus to requirements. During a national coal shortage, there were plans to convert it to burn oil, but that idea was tossed. With no future on the Bluebell, it left on the 2nd of October 1998 and is currently at Roxby Rail in Rutland, which is located close to where it used to work, and was subsequently sold to them in 2021, after which they intend to cosmetically restore it and put it on display. Built in 1948 as part of the third and final batch of 10 merchant navies which were built after nationalisation, Portline didn't receive a 6,000 gallon tender when completed, and ran with a 4,500 gallon tender, typically used by West Country and Battle of Britain Pacifics, until April 1949, when it received the proper 6,000 gallon tender. It was allocated to Bournemouth and worked express trains to and from Waterloo. In 1950 it was painted express blue and transferred to Stewart's Lane, where it hauled the famous Golden Arrow Pullman service until 1955, when it was transferred back to Bournemouth. It was rebuilt in May 1957 like the rest of its classmates, to eliminate some of the design's shortcomings, i.e. the air smooth casing and chain-driven valve gear. In April 1959 it hauled the Royal Train from Windsor to Hamworthy Junction. From then on it continued working until it was eventually withdrawn in September 1966 and was sent to Barrow Scrapyard in March 1967. It was eventually saved by the Portline Group, now known as Southern Locomotives Limited, and left in December 1982, becoming the 142nd engine to be saved from Barry, and was sent to Swindon where it was restored to working order in 1988. Becoming the first ex-Barry merchant navy to run again, and was featured in the final episode of The Train Now Departing.
it recaptures the only time in your life where you're, I think, old enough to perceive what's going on around you, but you haven't got to worry about it. You don't know whether your parents can pay their mortgage or their rates because they don't bother to tell you, because you're not old enough to understand. So all you know is that your beans on toaster on the table at 6 o'clock, and then you just sit there, haven't got a care in the world. 13 years old. What do you know? What do you know is going to happen? It's wonderful those days.
It arrived at the Bluebell Railway on the 31st of May that same year, and was only intended to stay for a short period to run in, but the warm welcome the group received convinced them to stay. It worked until June 1996, when it was withdrawn for the replacement of the boiler tubes. Portline left in early 2000, bound for its intended home at Swanage, and returned to service in November that year, and continued running in a limited capacity until October 2003, when cracks in the firebox were found. In 2004-2005, depending on the source, it was sold to Jeremy Hosking and moved to Southall. In January 2011, ownership of the engine was transferred to the Royal Scot Locomotive General Trust, and is currently based at Crewe, where it is currently awaiting its next overhaul. Its tender was last used behind 34046 Braunton and 34007 Wadebridge. Built in August 1927 as part of the Monsell batch of S15s, 830, later 30830, was based at Salisbury and lived a fairly uneventful working life until it was withdrawn in July 1964 and sent to Barry in December. In the summer of 1987, it was bought by the Monsell Locomotive Society and became the 192nd engine to be saved from Barry scrapyard. It was moved to the Bluebell on the 23rd of September the same year, where it joined its sister engine 847. When the opportunity to purchase the Schools Class Stowe came up, 830 was sold as it was felt that Stowe would make the collection more balanced. It was purchased by the Essex Locomotive Society, based at the North Yorkshire Moors Railway, and left the Bluebell on either the 28th or 29th of September 2000. It is currently still at the North York Moors and is currently still awaiting restoration. Built in 1926 by Aveling and Porter, the Blue Circle worked at the Snodland Cement Works in Kent from 1926 until 1962. In 1964, the owners, Associated Portland Cement, presented the engine to the Bluebell Railway, and it arrived there on the 23rd of April. But it wasn't used very often, as it didn't really fill any niche there. In 1997, it was loaned to a group based at the Buckinghamshire Railway Centre, who owned a similar locomotive, and it was eventually sold to them in 2001. Since then, it's been to the Chinner and Princess Risborough Railway in 2005, the Battlefield Line in 2007, and has even returned to the Bluebell a few times, making it the only former Bluebell engine to return to the railway after leaving. In 2015, it was sent to the Rushden, Higham and Wellingborough Railway, and worked there until 2020, when it was sent to the Nene Valley Railway, where it currently resides. Built in March 1942 at Beckton Works, this was the first of 40 locomotives built for wartime freight service, which is evident just by looking at it. The unusual appearance has gained them the nicknames Charlies, Coffee Pots, Biscuit Tins and Ugly Ducklings. They were 2 tons heavier than the Q-class that came before them, but were far more powerful. It is in fact the most powerful 060 to ever run on Britain's railways, and as such, found use after the war hauling freight trains and the occasional passenger train. The class was withdrawn from 1963 to 1966, with 33001 going in 1964. It was preserved and became part of the National Collection, and arrived at the Bluebell Railway on the 15th of May 1977, where it ran again on the 14th of September 1980, and ran until spring 1983, when it was sidelined for major work, with the engine returning to service on the 9th of September 1992, and enjoying another 8 years of running. In the summer of 2000, the engine was withdrawn again, and remained there until 2004. when the NRM asked if they could have the engine on display in the Great Hall in York, as it had very little engines relating to the Second World War and 060s in general. The Bluebell, seeing as they were short on undercover storage space, agreed, and the engine left for York on the 4th of May, where it also took part in that year's Railfest, with Blackmore Vale also in attendance. After that, it was moved into the Great Hall for display, and is still there to this day. Built in 1899, the T9s were built to work express passenger trains in the southwest of England, and gained the nickname Greyhounds due to their speed. 30120 was withdrawn in 1961, but was earmarked for preservation and made part of the National Collection. The T9 returned to steam in 1983 and ran on the Midlands and Swanage railways. When its boiler ticket expired in 1993, the decision was made to send the engine to the Bluebell Railway due to a lack of space at York. It arrived on the 24th of March 1994 and was put on static display. There were talks of overhauling the engine, but it never materialised as the railway already had other urgent priorities of its own to deal with. In 2007, it was decided that the T9 was to move to the Bodmin and Wenford Railway in Cornwall, with approval from the NRM. It left for Bodmin the following year on the 1st of February, and the engine returned to steam in August 2010. It was later transferred to the Swanage Railway and remains there today, with its boiler ticket expiring in September 2020. In April 2024, it was moved to the Flour Mill Workshop for overhaul. Built in 1943 at the Vulcan Iron Works in the USA, it and 14 other classmates were bought by the Southern Railway in 1946 to replace the aging Adams B4 tanks. They worked there until 1963, when the Class 07 diesel shunters came to replace them. 30064 was transferred to Eastleigh in June 1963 and continued to work until July 1967, when it was withdrawn and later sold to the Southern Loco Preservation Co Limited, and it was handed over to them on January 1968 and moved to the Bluebell Railway on the 24th of October 1971 and operated until late 1984. In 2003, it was repainted into a grey livery as War Department 1959, but since then it has been left at Horsted Keynes to gather rust. By the beginning of the 2020s, it became clear that there was zero intentions to restore the engine, so it was sold to someone who intends to within a 5 to 6 year period, and subsequently left the railway on the 27th of June 2022. As of December 2023, it is currently under restoration, and it is hoped that 30064 will return to the Bluebell Railway sometime in the future. Built in June 1953, 80064 worked in the Midland region, being based at Watford, where it worked semi-fast commuter trains into and out of London Euston. And in the summer of 1954, it piloted rebuilt Patriot 45534 E Tootle Broadhurst on the Shamrock Express. It was transferred to the Southern region in 1959 and was based at Ashford, and from there it went to Tonbridge, Exmouth and Bristol. It was withdrawn in August 1965 and sent to Barry in October that same year. In February 1973, it became the 34th engine to be saved from Barry, being saved by the 80064 Locomotive Fund, and was sent to Buckfastleigh on the South Devon Railway, which saw the engine return to steam in 1981, and it was put to work on the nearby Dartmouth Steam Railway. In March 1984, it was moved to the Bluebell Railway, where it worked for the remainder of its boiler ticket, which expired in the autumn of 1990. The main issue preventing its next overhaul was the need for copper welding in the firebox, which is necessary for the engine to run again. With Classmate 80151 returning to Steam in 2019, and no overhaul in prospect, it was decided to move the engine to the West Somerset Railway, and it left for Minehead on the 29th of November 2023. And those are the engines that used to live on the Bluebell Railway but don't anymore. I hope you all enjoyed, and sorry for not being able to make a good outro, but this is all you're getting, so bye!